Hello viewers, today we will discuss the trends in life expectancy. Life expectancy is an estimate of the average number of additional years a person could expect to live if the age-specific death rates for a given year prevailed for the rest of his or her life. Life expectancy at birth is the most commonly cited measure. It is a good indicator of current health conditions. Life expectancy is an important indicator of human development, since human development is measured in terms of three dimensions: health, education, and living standard. These dimensions further have sub-indicators, and life expectancy at birth is one of them. So, life expectancy is one of the most fundamental indicators of the condition of life, reflecting not just health but also stability and human security. It is also an indicator of inequality across societies. It effectively summarizes mortality at all ages and also acts as an indicator of quality of life. The higher the life expectancy, the better is the country's prosperity. Life expectancy, meaning and interpretation. The future of any country is largely a function of the kind of health the people are able to maintain. One of the frequently used summary measures is life expectancy, since it is believed to be easily interpretable. Life expectancy is the average number of years of life remaining to a person at a specified age, assuming current age-specific mortality rates continue during the person's lifetime. It was after the first Human Development Report that life expectancy became a thrust indicator. Life expectancy is an average. One cannot think of life expectancy as the normal or typical age of death. However, any average can hide different levels of variation. When it comes to life expectancy, variation is typically large, especially when life expectancy is low. The life expectancy in Sweden was 18 years in 1773. If one would take these 18 years as the typical lifespan in Sweden, it would essentially be a society without any adults. Another important feature of this concept is that life expectancy reflects 1 year. This means that life expectancy measures how long newborns will live on average if conditions remain unchanged, as in the specific year indefinitely. Accordingly, the life expectancy for Sweden in 2015 measures how long newborns in Sweden would live if the conditions in Sweden in 2015 were to remain unchanged indefinitely. The diagram 1 shows an increase in the life expectancy in world and major regions, which is clear from the upward rising curves. Measurement of life expectancy. Life expectancy is calculated by constructing a life table. The credit of preparing the first life table goes to John Grant, who published a rudimentary life table based on the analysis of bills of mortality in 1662. Thereafter, several scholars have contributed towards its improvement. In actuarial science and demography, a life table, also called a mortality table or actuarial table, shows for each age what the probability is that a person of that age will die before his or her next birthday. That is his probability of death. Life tables are a series of columns of data. The only raw data needed are the population and number of deaths, or the age-specific death rates. All other columns of data and the expectation of life are calculated from these. Life tables describe the mortality and survival patterns of a population. On the basis of annual mortality ratios for each age or age group, these tables provide information on parameters such as the number of survivors, the number of deaths, and the life expectancy. A life table is generally a table with 5 columns. These columns contain the following variables in succession: age, mortality ratio, number of survivors, number of deaths, and life expectancy. One can get the following information from a life table: population age structure, to understand whether there are lots of young individuals in the population or elderly, and other such similar questions. Population growth rate. It helps us to understand as to how fast the population size is growing or shrinking. Population survivorship patterns. It helps in answering questions like whether most of the mortality occurs in the very young or the very old population or equally across all ages. There can be different types of life tables. Period life table. It presents a picture of the mortality at one moment of time, such as 1 year, 3 years, or even 10 years. It shows a fictitious pattern of mortality since no single cohort has actually experienced or will ever experience this particular pattern of mortality throughout its lifespan. Cohort life table. It presents a historical record of what has actually occurred. It is a realistic summary of mortality for that cohort only. Complete life table. It is a life table based on a single year age data, which becomes very clumsy and unmanageable. Abridged life table. It is a life table which is based on broad age groups, for example 5 to 10 years, and is more precise, easier to construct, and is the most commonly used life table in any population analysis. A brief account of various columns and then their functional relationships is described in Table 1. Column 1, it shows the year of the age represented by X. Column 2, the survivorship function shows the number of persons alive at age X. It is denoted by LX. Column 3, this shows the number of deaths in the interval X, X plus 1 for persons alive at age X, computed as dx equal to Lx minus Lx plus 1. Column 4. This shows the probability of dying at age X and denoted by Qx. Column 5. This shows the mortality rate at age X. This is the sole input of the life table. All other quantities are determined once the mortality rate is determined. It is denoted by Mx. Column 6. It shows the total number of person years lived by the cohort from age X to X plus 1. It is denoted by Lx. Column 7. This column shows the total number of person years lived by the cohort from age X until all members of the cohort have died. This is denoted by Tx. Column 8. It is the remaining life expectancy of persons alive at age X. It is denoted by Ex. Trends in life expectancy around the world. The table 2 shows life expectancy at birth was 65.4 years for the world and life expectancy at age 60 was 90.2 years. Life expectancy at age 80 is 7.5 years from 2000 to 2005. For more developed regions, life expectancy at birth was higher than the less developed regions, and it maintains this pattern for life expectancy at age 60 and 80. In 20 years since the Cairo Conference on Development and Population held in 1994, life expectancy has increased worldwide, furthering the gain achieved in earlier decades. Life expectancy at birth for the world as a whole rose from 64.8 years in the period 1990 to 1995 to 70 years in the period 2010 to 2015, a gain of 5.2 years. The gains achieved by the world major regions range from 3.3 years in North America to 6.5 years in Africa. Particularly noteworthy is the fact that the least developed countries made a significant progress, gaining 8.9 years of life expectancy over the same period. Despite significant improvement in life expectancy over the past 20 years, most countries will fail to achieve a life expectancy of 75 years, 70 years for the countries with highest mortality levels by the target date of 2015, as proposed in the Programme of Action. During this period, 2010 to 2015, only 76 out of 201 countries or major areas have achieved a life expectancy at birth greater than 75 years. Although the gap in life expectancy at birth between the countries in more developed regions and the least developed countries remains large at 17.1, it is nonetheless 5 years smaller than in the early 1990s. Sex differences in longevity persist as well. Worldwide, women live 4.5 years longer than men on average, and this gap has remained essentially unchanged since 1994. Across the world's major regions, the difference between female and male longevity in the period 2010 to 2015 ranged from a low of 2.7 years in Africa to a high of 7.8 years in Europe. Life expectancy and mortality are two sides of the same coin. Life expectancy at birth reflects the overall mortality level of a population and summarizes the mortality pattern that prevails across all age groups, such as children, adolescents, adults, and elderly. According to United Nations, global life expectancy at birth increased from 48 years in 1950 to 1955 to 69 years in 2010 to 2015 and is expected to continue to rise over the next 4 decades. People in many countries are living longer due to increased access to healthcare, improvements in diet and hygiene, effective responses to infectious disease, and many other factors. These developments in healthcare and living conditions have not occurred uniformly around the world. North America has the highest average life expectancy of 79 years, followed closely by Europe having a life expectancy of 77 years, and Latin America and the Caribbean. Average life expectancies in Middle East, North Africa, and Asia Pacific regions are slightly above global average of 69 years. Sub-Saharan Africa is the only region where average life expectancy is below the global average. The table 3 shows the trends in the maternal mortality ratio between 1990 and 2013. For the world, it has declined from 380 to 210. For developed regions, this number declined to 16 from 26. It can be seen that in developing nations, the ratio was very high, even though it declined from 430 to 230 in 2013. The table 4 shows the levels and trends in child mortality between 1990 to 2011 for developed and developing regions. For the developed regions, the child mortality declined from 15 to 7. For the developing nations, the child mortality was high at 97 in 1990 and declined to 57 in 2011. For the world, the respective figures are 87 and 51 respectively. The diagram 2 shows a decline in probability of dying under age 5 for world and major region, which is one of the factors influencing changes in life expectancy. By 2050, life expectancy at birth is projected to average 76 years around the world, an increase of about 7 years from the current 5-year period 2010-2015. Regions that have a relatively high life expectancies in 2010 to 2015 are expected to make only modest gains compared with regions where life expectancy at present is much lower. North America is expected to see a 5-year gain in life expectancy by 2050 from 79 to 84 years. Sub-Saharan Africa, meanwhile, is projected to experience an increase in average life expectancy of 13 years from 55 to 68 years. Life expectancy is a significant factor in estimating the size of the world's population over time. Groups with higher life expectancies will on average live longer, and all else remaining equal have larger populations. A higher share of young people today in Europe and North America likely to be alive in 2050 compared with those residing in Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia Pacific region. Trends in life expectancy in the developing and developed nations. Life expectancy at birth is one of the benchmark indicators of development, and in developing countries it increased from 40.9 years in 1950 to 63.3 years by 2000, a remarkable and rapid achievement. Very little improvement in life expectancy at birth had occurred in the Third World by the middle of the 20th century. The Third World life expectancy approximated 41 years. However, after the end of World War II, life expectancy in the developing countries began to increase very rapidly. Between 1950 and 1970, life expectancy at birth improved by 14 years. In developing nations, the life expectancy improvement happened due to several reasons, such as adopting the Western death control technology and public health measures. In addition, the Third World was also able to benefit from Western technology such as pesticides, which played a major role in killing the mosquitoes that was a leading cause of death in many countries. In the developed countries, the fragmental data that are available suggest that life expectancy at birth was around 35 to 40 years in mid-1700s, that rose to about 45 to 50 years by the mid-1800s, and the rapid improvements began at the end of the 19th century, so that by the middle of 20th century, it was approximately 66 to 67 years. The major factors accounting for increasing life expectancy, especially in the period of rapid improvement, were better nutrition and hygiene practices, both private and public, as well as enhanced knowledge of public health measures. These advances were particularly important in lowering infant mortality, because when mortality is not controlled, the risk of death is high among infants and their mothers. Being that a large proportion of deaths occurs to infants and young children, their improved longevity plays a key role in increasing life expectancy at birth. The period from the late 1800s to 1950 in the West saw significant improvements in life expectancy. It is noteworthy that medical advances played a relatively small role in reducing infant and childhood mortality and increased life expectancy. Since the middle of the 20th century, gains in life expectancy have been more due to medical facilities that have reduced mortality among older people. These reductions are harder to achieve than decrease in infant mortality, hence the improvements in life expectancy at birth slowed down during that time period. Nevertheless, looking at the 20th century as a whole, reduction in mortality among younger persons played the major role in increasing life expectancy at birth. It is difficult to predict if life expectancy at birth between more and less developed countries will continue to converge. Most likely, the Third World could catch up with the more developed nations. The Table 5 shows that life expectancy has been increasing for all three regions from 1950-55 to 2005-2010. For developed region, it increased from 66 years to 77.1. For developing nations, the increase was from 41.7 years to 67.7. The table 6 depicts that life expectancy at birth for females was higher than males for the world, and so was the case for life expectancy at age 60. Male life expectancy at birth for the world was 66 years as against 71 for females. Life expectancy at age 60 for the world was 18 years for males and 21 years for females. The table 7 shows that life expectancy globally increased from 52.4 years to 66.5 years from 1960 to 2000. The other regions have also witnessed a rise. For North America, life expectancy increased from 70.1 years to 77.6. Implications of changes in life expectancy. An increasing life expectancy can have a number of implications. More people with a disability. There can be a strong relation between age and disability because probability of having disability increases with age, so the population can become unhealthy. Growing demand for aged care. Growing proportion of aged will put pressure on the healthcare services and will pose a challenge in case of shortages. Aging of population. This is an inevitable outcome of rise in life expectancy since large numbers are able to survive till old ages. The diagram 3 shows that life expectancy can rise in response to improved sanitation, better income, technological innovations, and better education. The diagram 4 shows life expectancy at birth as an indicator of human development, along with education index and GDP index. Conclusions. Life expectancy depicts the average number of years that a person can live. It also reflects the mortality levels in a population. It is determined by a number of factors such as nutrition, health, hygiene, and technological advancements. Winning the battle over many infectious diseases led to increased life expectancy. Scientific discoveries of bacteria and virus also worked in the same direction. Increases in life expectancy is a positive indicator. However, greater life expectancy also demands larger resource space. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. In the next session, I shall talk about another related topic. Goodbye. Thank you very much.